What happened? Yeah. Not a year. You go from my. Another year. You go from my. I don't know what happened. You were hearing before. I don't know what happened. I was hearing her a few minutes ago. Can't hear you. Can you hear me? She can hear me, but I can't hear her. Wow. Can you say something? Hello. Hello. Maybe now. I don't know where I'm alive. Yeah? Yeah? Am I alive? You are alive. You are alive. Look, we stop her now. Say she will come back. Thank God say we start now. I know they plan to go house on Friday. Every weekend he wants to run home to meet his wife. So today, welcome to Film Talk. As usual, I'm having a guest that you'll be surprised with our credentials. Well, you can always get us at filmlab.ng and be part of Film Talk as an audience at filmlab.ng/filmlab online. Today I'll be talking to Eno Enefiok, a London-based filmmaker. She's originally Nigerian anyway. She's been described in many words that call for attention. These are intelligent and resourceful, natural authority, somebody has natural authority that creates confidence and willingness. She's calm, efficient, intelligent, problem solving person with clear communication skills. She studied journalism anyway. She's a firm persona with a sense of diplomacy, dedicated hard worker with infectious energy, reliable producer and assistant director, team manager. Eno Enefiok wrote an award-winning movie script, called Asylum, that won a 2019 British Urban Film Festival. Should I say Buff or BUFF?
Buff is fine.
Okay, Buff. The award went for the fact that her script was the best live script. Welcome, Eno Enefiok.
Thank you.
All the way from London.
Yeah.
Can you briefly take us into your 6 years of filmmaking experience? But I would ask you, why did you choose the UK to develop yourself instead of Lagos, where forward-thinking women in film can make all the difference we need in Nigeria? That's to say, you can tell us a little bit about your 6 years experience.
Okay. Well, I moved to the UK with my mom and my siblings when I was 9. So I lived here. So that's why I sort of got into the industry in the UK as opposed to Nigeria. It's been quite an interesting sort of 6 years. I say my experience is sort of a little bit all over the place, but that sort of tends to happen because the industry here is very sort of close-knit, the sort of people you find in the industry here are very well connected, have gone to good film schools, and they are able to sort of get production quite quickly. So for someone like myself who didn't have that, coming from an asylum-seeking mother who, you know, worked hard to get citizenship and make sure we got to university and stuff like that, that wasn't my experience. I definitely had to sort of start from the bottom, learn a lot of mistakes, work for free for a few years, and then sort of at some point just started to realize that I knew what I was doing and deserved to get paid, and then started to demand it. And then people were like, okay, yeah, we'll pay you. And I was like, oh, it's that easy. But yeah, the first production I ever worked on was a K-pop music video about 6 years ago. And to date, it's still been the biggest budget music video, anything I've ever worked on. The craziest shoot. It was like 4 or 5 days of filming. I think the budget was 2 or 3 million, although they clearly went over budget. It was just like every second they would be like, we want this, which was completely different to what they'd asked for before. And we had to just make it happen, which was sort of interesting. The industry here doesn't work that way. There's a lot of planning. There's a lot of laws and permits and things like that you need to get in place. And in terms of why I sort of haven't gone to Lagos or Nigeria or things like that, I worked the first feature film, or the second feature film actually, that I worked on, but it was my first as like a line producer. That was my credits. And I clearly got it because I was Nigerian and they were shooting in Nigeria, so it's going to save them money on visas. But I was totally fine with that because I hadn't been back to Nigeria since I'd come to the UK, so it was going to be nice to be able to get a free trip back home without and get to work on films there. And when I got there, I started to understand perhaps why, even though Nollywood is a very successful industry in terms of it's the third biggest industry, there's Hollywood, there's Bollywood, and then there's Nollywood. The way films are made in Nigeria is definitely a lot different to the way things are made in the West. And that probably had something to do with why the quality of the work that was being churned out, even though there was clear talent there. Like today, the most talented art department I ever worked with was the Nigerian crew. They were so efficient. Every time you said you needed something, they just did it. Here, people complain all the time because they have unions and they're very well protected. So it's always like with diplomacy, you have to be like, hey, do you mind doing this? Do you mind doing that? But in Nigeria, everyone was on it. So yeah, my hope and dream is to get a little bit more success here in the UK. Over the past year, I've been trying to solidify my career as a director as opposed to as an assistant director and as a producer, because that's what was always the end goal. And I've also been in the UK, seeing the way the film industry works. There is a big demand for more diversity, both in front and behind the camera, because that is the reason why a lot of the things that are being made are perhaps unconsciously biased, or maybe portray stereotypes that people don't necessarily notice because there aren't people of color around to highlight these issues. So for me right now, I think it's important that I am in the UK, trying to make it and trying to just add a bit more color to the film industry. And once I'm done, I definitely would, the hope and dream is to be able to open a film school in Nigeria and be able to get, actual directors and cinematographers and producers from the West that I've worked with to be able to, go out there and be able to teach classes and sort of pass on that technical knowledge that I feel like perhaps the Nigerian industry is lacking, because they have everything else. We've got talented actors, we've got amazing weather, beautiful locations, and very, very hungry people who really want to learn. But those resources are very scarce in Nigeria. So I feel like, for me, I can't necessarily tell authentic Nigerian stories because I was born there, but I lived in the West. So my experience of life is always going to be influenced by both sides. But it's my responsibility as a filmmaker, as a person of color, as an African, to make sure that when I do get successful, I try to make sure that I don't just hoard it for myself and try and keep all the glory and the accolade, that, you actually try and educate the next generation, because the hope is that they will do what you did, but better. Yeah.
You mentioned, before I go on, you mentioned union. I mean, union means guilds, right? Union means guilds, filmmaking guilds in the UK, right?
Yes. So there's a few of them.
Okay, in the UK.
Yes. So okay. You have You have the APA, which is the associate. I can't remember what they stand for, to be honest with you. And then you have another one called BEC2, which again are sort of for like the broad film industry, like crew members and producers and people. But then
what I want to emphasize there is that you talk about them protecting talent and crew. In Nigeria, people are willing to work like you're saying, but they're not protected by guilds. There is no standard fee for all kinds of talents in the industry. What advice would you give before we go on, please?
Well, in terms of like putting those measures in place.
Yes, because if you don't have structure in the industry, nobody will be able to articulate talents and projects to the point that everybody will feel satisfied and go home satisfied and be willing. You said Nigerians are enthusiastic, but the enthusiasm lies in the fact that, like you said, people do not have opportunities to show their talent. But then, even when they are so enthusiastic, guilds or unions are not protecting them in terms of getting their fees. That sometimes they're owed, through 5 movies, which is not very healthy.
Yeah. No, I completely understand. I mean, for me, I'm actually not part of the union, even though I really should be, because they really fought for us over COVID. I just stopped paying for them a few years ago because they were quite useless a few years ago. But apparently they're better now. So I'm going to rejoin. But the reason why I'd say I've been somewhat protected is even like when you go onto productions, you have contracts, you have like laws, you have things in place that you demand and, production demands. So you're protected in that sense. You will get paid. There's standard guidelines in terms of fees. So if you have a job and it gets cancelled 48 hours before the shoot, you have to pay that person at least 50% of what you were supposed to pay them. And if it gets cancelled 24 hours or less, you have to pay the full rate regardless. They get paid and everything is that way. But I've been protected because I actually am signed with a diary service, which is kind of like an agent. So when they find me jobs, or when I find jobs and I decide I want someone to deal with the paperwork and deal with negotiating my fee, because as an artist, that's probably one of the things that we hate having to discuss is money. But it's very important that you always spend time in noticing and being aware of what you're worth. Every sort of 6 months to 12 months, I advise everyone to sort of take a step back, think, and ask themselves, what skills have I developed over the past 6 months that will justify me increasing my rate by £50 a day or £100 a day? Sorry to use pounds, it's just I haven't used Naira in so long, so I have no idea what the conversion rate is. But it's one of those things.
About 450 something Naira, I suppose. Yeah, the last time I checked.
Yes. So yeah, it's very important. So my advice is, in Nigeria, it's going to be very difficult to create unions first, because there's going to be a lot of fight back from some people in the industry. Because from my experience when I was there, I noticed that a lot of people were being underpaid. My job was the line producer, so I was in charge of the money, and I knew how much people were getting paid. But then when I started getting closer to the crew and I would talk to them and they would tell me how much they were getting paid, it was different to what I paid the person who found them, which means that person took a huge amount of commission. Like, normally like my agents, they take 10%, which I think is quite good, because sometimes they take up to 30%. This person took 90% of their wage.
Jesus.
And obviously I didn't tell them because I didn't want to start any beef, but that made me sad. And that's another reason why I want to start a film school and start to educate people from the start that they need to solidify their worth. Because if you start working for free, it's very hard to start to tell someone that the same thing you did last week for free is now going to cost them £500 because you did it for free last week. What's the difference? It's just easier to sort of set that precedent from the get-go.
From the beginning.
So my advice for Nigeria would be for people to just start agencies and start to get people who are already in the industry to sign up with their agents, and they act as their representative. So in that sense, the agent will be speaking to the production company or whoever wants to hire them, they will negotiate the fee, and they will insist that 50% is paid to them, upfront, as like, a deposit, or as like a security that that person is going to get the job. And obviously in doing so, you have to give a permission to this person, but that gives you a lot more security and a lot more control. It also means that because this agent is also is going to stand a loss if you don't get paid, they're more likely to fight for you, to chase down that person, to take legal actions, because they have a business and can afford that on the insurance. And in doing so, I think it's going to inspire other people to start agencies. And when agents begin to start, agents are going to then probably go together and decide we should start a union. So that's what I would do.
Thank you so much for that explanation, because that is the next question I was going to ask you. Thank you so much. Now, the next question is, between film and journalism, which you study, what fascinates you more? I know, I just wanted to say it because I know. What fascinates you more? Because it's a thin line between the two.
I think I studied journalism as like a safe second choice or second option. Like,
Okay.
I never particularly enjoyed it. I enjoyed writing. I'm a good writer, and I also I studied journalism and creative writing, so I did them both. So I enjoyed the creative writing side. Journalism was like a means to an end, because it meant that I could easily be able to graduate and get a job in a very easy sector, rather than having to come out with just a creative writing degree and struggle to find my footing. Especially, I graduated in 2012, so it was just around the end of that recession, and it was around the time where everyone was very scared that print journalism at that point was dead, and publications were struggling to get people to go onto their websites to read the news, because everyone had a blog at that point, and everyone read people's blogs instead of reading the news. So yeah, it was not a fun time to try and get into being a journalist. But I started off doing it. I managed to get a job, and I luckily was writing on film. So I would go and go to film premieres and interview celebrities and watch films before everyone, and then write about it, and which was quite fun. But it was also it just highlighted how much I didn't enjoy just sitting down and writing about film, which I thought nice consolation prize. I just wanted to be part of that. I wanted to be part of that world. So yeah, then that just became my goal.
Good way to go. But then you probably had issues, you probably had problems that some other person can learn. Like, I know the environment there is, should I say smooth? I wouldn't say smooth, because there is no environment that is actually very, very smooth. So what problems probably did you probably encounter as a journalist, switching from journalism to film, and even practicing filmmaking for 6 years? What are the bumps on the road?
I mean, for me, the bumps on the road definitely come from being a person of color and being a woman, because the industry here is very Caucasian male. And there's a lot of nepotism that goes on. So a lot of the time you go on sets and you say, "Oh, how did you get on the job?" And you're like, "Oh, I know that person, and that person knows that person, that person knows that person." So there's very few people who are on the set who just happen to be hired because they're good at their job. And so when you start out, you have to find a way to break into those circles. And the problem is, because it's so difficult, when people sort of break in, they don't necessarily help others. They kind of get to this sort of mentality that it was hard for me, so it should be hard for you. And yeah, that's definitely very difficult to maneuver. Another issue for me was because obviously when I started out, I didn't know anything about the industry. I didn't know that half the shoots I was doing were like stupid or like out of the union, or I shouldn't be doing them. I was just desperate and hungry to sort of work on set. So it took me a few years to start to sort of, navigate my way through. And it was just pure luck finding an opportunity where someone needs someone straight away, so they don't have the time to not pick you and you just happen to be there. You just call them at the right moment at the right time, and then they take you, and then they're like, "Okay, cool, you're in." And you kind of need at least like 10 or 20 of those people. Once you find one, you can't rely on that one person, because you know, everyone needs a few people to be able to like go to, because there's going to be one day they call you, you're not available, and then that day you're not available and they find someone else that might be their go-to person. So you could lose that person for 6 months because they're always going to be going with the other person. What are you going to do? You need to make sure you have other people that are going to be hiring you throughout the time. So I'd say it's just finding that balance of not stressing when you're not working, learning how to save your money, and learning how to ask for what you're worth, because that's another issue with the industry. People sometimes overwork themselves because they're getting paid less money than they should be, so they have to work more in order to make enough to make ends meet. Whereas if they just asked for what they deserve, because you know, when people work in companies, they might have the same role as another person, but they'll go to their boss and they say, I need a raise because my wife is stopped working and my child is going to university or whatever, and the boss will give them a raise, even though it means they're not getting paid, you know, £10,000 more than someone else, because that person, for that circumstance, they need that money, and the company sees them as valuable enough to give them that. So why don't you ask for what you need and what you deserve? It's difficult when you start doing it. It never gets easier, but if you don't want to struggle, and if you want to have time to be able to grow as an artist, and by that I mean being able to find the time to work on your own projects, if it's like writing your own scripts or finding money to make your own films, which is what I'm sort of doing at the moment now. And I'm also in the next room, I'm making a stop motion film because, you know, I have a spare room at the moment because my flatmate moved out when the corona happened. And I haven't been able to find someone to replace him because of lockdown. So I have a free room, and I thought I can just turn that into a little studio and make a film in there, see if I can get it done before someone moves in. So yeah, that's a challenge to myself. I just challenge everyone to just try and find as much time to make their own stuff, because it's going to be very difficult to convince people that you have the talent, even though you do, and that you can actually do the things you're saying you can do, because no one likes to take a risk, even though everyone likes to say they do. No one does. Like I see it all the time, you know, applying for funding and, you know, not getting it. And it's not because my project wasn't good, because the projects that got picked were actually terrible. I looked at them, other people said that, but what made them stand out is they have more experience technically, or a bigger portfolio than I do. So yeah, just try and keep building your portfolio as much. My big mistake that I made was, because I was so hung up on the fact that I am a woman and I'm a person of color and that I wasn't born in the UK, so I have like these 3 things against me, and also I'm young as well. I always told myself that I have to make something that is just amazing and just looks amazing. That has to be my first thing. And because of that, it's taken me years to do that. Whereas if I had just done what everyone did, which is just to get a camera, find a story, make it, put it out into the world, and just keep doing that, I probably would have got a little bit more opportunities. But, you know, it's never too late, and I'm doing that now. So that's my advice is, yeah, find time, keep growing as an artist, keep making your stuff, but just try not to be too ambitious. Try and make sure you actually, you know, if you only have the resources to make something by yourself, so you only have a camera, so you're a 1-person crew, then, you know, don't try and make an action thriller, because it's probably going to turn out to look terrible. Like maybe make a short little drama or comedy with 2 actors. That's what I mean by don't be doing too ambitious. It's not like don't limit your ideas, but, you know, be realistic with what you can achieve with the resources you have. Yeah. Yeah, that's why I think to be ambitious with what you want to achieve in your career, but be realistic with what you can achieve right now, and, you know, just do it.
You've said so much in the span of so few minutes. Thank you. Yeah, I want to reintroduce you again. I'm talking to Eno Enefiok all the way from London, from her apartment in London. She's been described as an intelligent and resourceful person, a natural authority that creates confidence and willingness. She's calm, efficient, intelligent problem solver with clear communication skills. She's a firm persuader with a sense of diplomacy, dedicated hard worker with infectious energy, reliable producer and assistant director, team manager. So the next question I'm going to ask you is to take us a little bit into your routine as a producer and as an assistant director, because I believe you directed your film yourself, I suppose, before.
I've directed like music videos and like, you know, documentary type things. Asylum will be my first narrative short, which is what I'm sort of applying for funding for at the moment.
Okay.
Hoping to make that at the end of the year or beginning of next year.
Yeah. So your attributes have earned you jobs.
Sorry. My
The
mom is
attributes have
calling.
sorry, the attributes have earned you so much accolades. You've shot music videos, you've made brand films, short music videos, shots, and a lot of things that you've done in a short while. Now, so if I'm to come to your set, what would I see? What would I see you doing on a particular set, a film set? What would I see you? What is your routine?
Well, it depends which role I'm playing. Assistant director and producer are sort of two separate roles. They are very similar in terms of when you're in pre-production. The only difference is the producer is not really on set. In fact, it's always best to not have a producer on set. A producer on set means something bad has happened. That's the only reason why they come on, or like they're bored. Because they only come on they come on to tell the AD that they're wasting too much money, there's no money for overtime, or to tell the director, why are you shooting this? I told you not to shoot this. We don't want this shot. You know, that's why the producer comes on set most of the time.
So how about the screenwriter?
A scriptwriter. Well, a scriptwriter, they don't really come on set very often. I've only ever been on a few shoots where I've had a scriptwriter on set. And again, you don't want them on set. They're really annoying because they wrote the script. So when they wrote it, they had a vision in their head, but they're not the director. And the director has their vision, which is what we're trying to make happen. So when you have a screenwriter on set, you have this issue of, oh God, this guy is going to be like, so again, as an assistant director, it's my job to get rid of these problems as quickly as possible. So I will go to the writer and be like, oh, have you been to the green room? Yes, we have Oreos there. And yeah, it's coffee. Oh, and I will tell an assistant, take him to the green room and show him where the coffee is, and then tell them, keep him there for like the next 2 hours. I don't want to see him on set. And they will do it. They will just keep entertaining that person for 2 hours. They don't have to come. And we can get the shot without them, you know, annoying us by, you know, interrupting, because, you know, shooting is very stressful. A lot of money is being spent like every second, not just in like, you know, you've got the location fees, you've got the crew, you've got the actors, you've got the kits. So yeah, it's a very stressful situation, and depending on what kind of shoot you're doing, the genre, it can be very tense, especially when you're working with actors who have, you know, egos, and they also have their own vision of how the character that this person has written should be played. So it's just a lot of, it's my job as an assistant director is just a lot of politics. In pre-production, my job is to read the script, or if I'm working on a commercial, I read the treatment. I break it down into every component. So every location, like literally every scripted location, bedroom. If there's 20 bedrooms, I break it down to every character's bedroom. The exterior locations, the interior, and I break down every actor, including every background actor. So that's every extra. So sometimes these stuff aren't scripted, which is why I need to have meetings with directors and producers. And I'll be like to the director, who never wants to talk to me, because all they care about is talking about, you know, all the pretty stuff with the DOP. But I need to have these conversations, or else none of the stuff is going to be ready. I need to find out how many extras he needs for this scene that says, there's a crowd, and he'll be like, I want 500. And the producer will be like, we only have the budget for 100. And I'll go back and he'll be like, you already can only have 100. And he's like, no, it has to be 500. I'm like, dude, it has to be 100. Like, break it. Then, you know, you have this back and forth for a while. And then, you know, there's a compromise. And then it's my job to get a breakdown of what all these backgrounds have to look like, which is something a lot of people don't realize, is that background actors are also casted. Like, when you send casting calls for background, there's also a specific breakdowns, and when you're an assistant director, it falls into your department. Now, it's not my job because I'm the head of department. So luckily, I have my second assistant director, and I make them do that. That's your job. You take this breakdown now. You find all the actors. You talk to all the agents. You book all of them. You call everybody. So yeah, the AD department, our job is essentially to run the whole set, but run the talent. So every day after the shoot, I would have to have a debrief with the director and the cinematographer and the producer sometimes, just to talk about what issues we ran through in the day. Did we go over budget? Did we go over time? Why did we go over time? What can we do tomorrow to make sure we don't go over time? Did we cut a scene today? If we did cut a scene, where can we put that scene back in? Because I need to put that back into the schedule somewhere. And then you have to have discussions. We may need to cut this part. We need to cut that part. And then after that meeting, I have to call my second assistant director, who's been waiting for me to call all this time, to then pass on this brief to him. And then now that he's got all the timing solidified, because if you have to cut a scene on a day, you might have to push it into the next day, which means the call sheet can't be sent out until you've wrapped the day and you've had that meeting, which means everyone is like at home at 11 o'clock waiting to just find out what the hell they're going to do the next day. And everyone just hates you because they think you're just sitting around doing nothing, but you're actually, you know, doing your best to do their job. And I have to call my second AD, apologize. I always do, because I'm a nice one. A lot of people in my job are mean, but there's a reputation that ADs are mean, so people are always weirded out that I'm nice, and they think I can't do my job properly, but I can. And I just say, we need to do this, we need to do that. If people's call times have changed, especially if they're like really famous actors, then his job is now to call them at 11 p.m. and be like, hey, so your call time is no longer 12 p.m. It's now 6 a.m. I'm going to have a car come and pick you up 4 a.m. in the morning. They go crazy. He has to listen to them for the next half hour, bitch, but they'll do it. They'll always be late. That always happens. And it's just literally, it's project managing, but on a big, crazy scale. And, you know, just having to react to every situation and just having a plan B and a plan C. So the biggest or most important part of the job is to make sure you have a good team in your department, because it's not always that you get to work with a director who respects the AD department enough to communicate effectively with them. A lot of directors, as I said, because a lot of people in the industry just come up because they know someone. So they kind of get the role before they work their way up. So they don't quite know what everyone's job is. So a lot of them just assume that because they made a decision with their cinematographer, I know that decision, even though I wasn't in the room. So we'd be on set and they'd be like, oh, we're going to do this. And I'll be like, what is that? They're like, oh, don't like, and then you're like, dude, I don't know what you're talking about.
Jesus.
And then you have to react to that, because that has a domino effect to the rest of the day. And then you have to pull them to the corner and be like, hey, so today, we managed to get through it, but that was not cool. Make sure you talk to me. But, it doesn't always happen. So sometimes I will be on set like an hour or 2 hours early, so I can be able to talk to the director beforehand, just to find out if there's anything I didn't know about. There always will be. It's a thankless job, but it's definitely taught me a lot when it comes to actually being a director. I mean, back in the day, that was the progression to becoming a director. You worked in the AD department, and then you became a director. And then I think around the 80s or 90s, when it became just really fashionable and cool to just be a director, people just kind of bypassed the whole getting set experience and went straight in there. And I feel like the industry has definitely suffered a lot for it, because there's a lot of people, crew members, we work very long hours, we work very hard. The director turns up on set, sometimes he's 5 minutes late, like we're all waiting around for him. I'm there 2 hours early. Some people are there 4 hours early because there's pre-calls, art department need to come and dress the place. So when you have to deal with people who, it's not even necessarily like they're doing it on purpose, it's just they don't really understand that that's the process, because they've never it can be quite frustrating. So I definitely prefer to work with directors who at least have, did some running at some point in their life, so they know what it's like to have to run around and make coffees and do all these things that seem very, very irrelevant. But you know, if I have to go get my coffee every time on set, we're going to lose at least 2 hours of shooting. So it's very important that someone gets me coffee, as stupid as it sounds. Everyone's job is very important.
Very important,
And
yeah.
I've learned that because for 6 years I worked my way up doing all those terrible jobs and complaining, and then getting up to the next level and being like, oh, that's why I was doing it. They weren't being mean to me. It's a necessary job. I guess what I learned was just to make sure that when I ask for these things, I'm just polite, because I know it's tough, you know, to do this stuff, and you don't get paid a lot sometimes. Like, you don't.
I know. So, I'll quote you now. When COVID launched itself into the world, you wrote us a note from London and posted on our website on the Film Lab forum. You said, I'm self-isolating alone and have been spending the time getting better at film photography. The peoples I talked to during my walks to the shops exercise really helped me to springboard story ideas, and I'm getting much better at composition, lighting, framing, vocals, focal length. Yeah, all very useful tools and skills for directing. So how are you staying inspired and creating right now? You sort of answered my question. But I wonder if this really is reflecting your reality as a filmmaker. Can you tell us generally how COVID has affected the industry in London?
Well, as you said, my background is very spotty. So a lot of people in the industry either work on one side or the other. They either work in the features, the drama, as it's called, which is scripted, or you work in commercials, which is commercials and music videos and branded content and stuff. I do both because as a person of color, it's hard to sort of make a living sort of staying in one or the other. It's very cliquey, and also I generally don't like the environment on scripted. It just lasts very long. You don't have a life, you don't sleep, you don't eat properly. You know, sometimes the shoots goes on for months, whereas with commercials it's like a few days, a few weeks, and then it's done, and you get paid way more money. Sometimes I make the same amount of money in 2 weeks on a commercial than I did in, you know, 6 months on a film. So it's very difficult. But when COVID happened, the whole industry kind of stopped. My last shoot was 2 days before lockdown was announced in London, and I remember even like the day before the shoot, I didn't even know if it was going to happen, because, you know, everyone was scared about the idea of even going ahead and doing a music video shoot. We were shooting it not in London, so that means the crew had to travel out of London, which made it even slightly more dangerous because there could be, you know, cross-contamination and things like that. And then we were shooting in multiple locations in Hastings, which is this seaside town, which is famous for that battle in, I think it's 1066. I don't know, whatever. British history is not really for me. So yeah, and that shoot was weird. We had to wear gloves all the time, had to sanitize all the time, had to wear masks all the time. It made it very difficult for me to do my job. I honestly did not enjoy it. We also had a child on set, even though I explicitly said we should not have one, and they agreed. And then I turned up and there was a child there, which again happens. That's something that happens as a first assistant director. And that can be very detrimental to you in your career. So I advise to everyone to always make sure that you send every warning in writing. You can't just say, hey, I told this person not to do it and they did it. If anything happens, you are liable. You are in charge of the health and safety of everyone on the set. So if you don't want a producer to sort of put you in jeopardy, make sure there is multiple sort of accounts of you being like, you can't have this, you can't have that. If you do this, you need to do that. Even if you said it in person, always put it in writing, always make sure they've been emailed. And always start the email with just following up from our conversation. So it doesn't seem like you're trying to like put them in trouble, but it's just to make sure that you have that at your disposal, because someone could sue you. You know, it's there's a lot of risk that you're taking there. And as much as unions protect you, they can't always protect you. So that's something to think about. And yeah, the industry just completely stopped. No one had any work for months. I think it's starting to reopen from what I'm reading in the news. Like, I think like soap operas are starting to shoot at the end of this month or the beginning of next month because they don't have any more episodes. They're running out. Soap operas, they shoot like 40 scenes a day, you know, they just churn them out. But yeah, they're running out because they show them daily. So there's only so much left. In terms of commercials, it's still slow. I think it's going to take a while for it to really pick up. And the key thing in the industry is there was always an issue with diversity in the industry beforehand. And so I think there's a big worry that with the industry feeling, you know, being so behind, when we get start up, the people who are going to suffer the most are the too few diverse people that, you know, they have to cling on to, because throughout the pandemic, no one really thought about us. The fact that, you know, if you're a person of color, you're less likely to get help from the government. I didn't get as much help, but there were no real funds out there. And then when they did put them out, I never heard about it until like maybe 2 or 3 weeks after, you know, they had sort of gone, because they were always sort of posted or distributed in sort of circles and bubbles that I'm just not privy to, because I'm just not in that side of the world. So there's definitely a lot of barriers to break down in the industry. But I'm hoping that because of this crisis, I hope that it's highlighted just how much there needs to be a little bit more sanctions and control and protections, not just from unions, but from the government, in terms of the way the film industry actually works. Because they've essentially just been, not just in the UK, but if you look at other countries, especially in the States, they've kind of been allowed to kind of just create their little world and their own little country where everything can just kind of be exactly the way it was back in the past, but they'll pretend that it's not, in terms of trying to like push content or always just have that same person and sort of be like, we're diverse, what about that guy? But in terms of the structures behind, it's definitely very old-fashioned. And I feel like that's why it's important for people like myself, who is a person of color, but not just a person of color who was born in the UK, someone who actually has come from a developing country and sort of has that hunger and fight and tenacity, and has actually seen like real poverty. Luckily, I didn't have to live in it, but I've seen what it's like to literally have nothing. People here have no idea how lucky they are to have the opportunities they can. I mean, here you can just pick up a camera and, you know, put it on YouTube and become an internet celebrity in like, you know, in 2 months. Not that you can't do that in Nigeria, but it's a lot harder because the access to like a good quality camera and, you know, good editing suite and things like that, that would be able to generate that interest is just not as easy to come by. So yeah, just my advice, keep making things and let's just fill the earth with more stories by people like us. And I think the more we do it, and the more people see that despite the fact that the quality in terms of visually is not as polished as the rest, because people are interested in it, people will eventually be like, maybe we should actually start making this type of content, because people don't care if they're making money. So we just need to prove to the industry that we are worth investing in, because that's the only way.
Especially now that it would seem as if the West have exhausted their stories. We need to mine our stories in Africa and show to the world. I think that's very important, you know. So let's go on. Let me read your brief here, your brief synopsis. It's 1999, Route 30, Nigerian, beautiful with tired eyes, lands in London with her 3 infant children, 10 days before the new millennium. Young, 11, the responsible one, Itoro, 9, taller than her age, but an innocent face spoils her physical illusion of maturity, and Samuel, 7, simply adorable. They are asylum seekers with no way to go. At the phone box, Ruth reaches out to an old friend and asks for shelter. She's rejected. Out of options, the desperate single mother reaches out to Ola, late 30s, typical sly Yoruba man, the property manager with a vacant property which he allows them to live in. It is soon revealed that his generosity comes with a price. He threatens to evict them if Ruth doesn't pay him money that she doesn't have. Offering an engagement ring buys them a few other days. This is a true story. So
I can just read the log line, which is very short. Let me find it.
Okay.
So I think you're reading the whole summary of the whole script, which is very long.
Yeah.
Let me find. Sorry, my Mac is just playing up right now. I just don't understand what people.
And I have never seen. This is the second time I'm seeing somebody write a treatment like this, with photographs, with everything.
Actually, I updated that treatment. Yeah, I thought it was too wordy. You needed more pictures so you could understand what.
Yeah, that's right.
What like, but the log line is it's 10 days before the millennium. Ruth and her 3 infant children, Nigerian asylum seekers, arrive in London with nothing but hope and a few suitcases. When their initial plans for shelter falls through, they are forced to seek help from a wolf in sheep's clothing. And that's the summary. That's
how many lines did you write, please?
How many lines? What, for the script?
For the log line.
Well, log lines are normally like 1 or 2 sentences, 3 at best.
Okay. Sometimes I always like writing my log lines in 1 sentence, 29 words maximum.
Yeah, a lot of people do that, which is great. I can't wait to get to that point. I'm working on. I'm working.
How could you say that?
No, because that's good, because it means that you can sort of summarize your idea. You can just, put it into this and unpack it. And I think I'm sort of getting there now. Over COVID, I've been working on a few projects, a few personal projects.
The way I understand it, they say ironic protagonist fights antagonists for this to achieve this goal. That gives you 29 words. Anyway, that's by the side. But this is your own. Yeah, this is your personal story. I mean, when you thought of writing the script or creating the story, how did you adapt a real life situation that actually happened to you as a person into a story? What was your feeling like? Was it cathartic? Were you letting out some emotions? Yeah, I know that writers always let out their emotions, but what value do you think your story added to your person and the society that you want to make the movie for? Or what value would you add to the society if you make this movie eventually?
Well, it's definitely getting made, because that's like the goal now. But I feel like in the UK, especially, whenever there are content that is made in terms of film and things like that have Black people, they're always a specific type of Black people. They're like the ones that like grew up in South London and like probably sold drugs and did like terrible things at some point, but now they're reformed. And it's like, I've been watching these terrible stories being made over and over again since I was a child. It's just never changed. Like even now, the biggest film for Black people is Blue Story. It's like, it's the same as Kidulthood, which came out 15 years before, and that was great for Black people. So I'm like, can't you see it's the same crap? And also it doesn't represent the majority of Black people in London, I mean in the UK, let alone just in general. I feel like the British people don't know a lot about the African story. It's like they've just decided not to remember the part they played in our history when it comes to colonialism, the impact it has, and why we are the way we are as people. And in terms of the Nigerian community here, there is a huge segregation in terms of the adults, like the ones who were sort of moved here, when they're like deep into adulthood, they tend to just stay in like the communities, they go to church, and they just kind of stay in that bubble. And it's only their kids that tend to sort of mix, which makes growing up quite difficult, because at home it's like little Nigeria, and then outside you're in England. And I didn't yeah, I don't see things like that being projected. But also, more importantly, I mean, as a Black woman, I don't see Black women being represented at all properly on screen. I see us. I only see a certain type of Black woman being seen on screen. It's sort of like, in order to be Black, famous and Black as a woman, you kind of have to bypass being Black. Like, no one calls Oprah Black. It's almost like she's beyond it. You know, she's Oprah. Same like Beyonce.
She was laughed at. She was mocked when she started.
Yes.
You know, that's why she's helping. What is her name? Erivo. You didn't know Erivo?
No.
Who acted Harriet Tubman?
Oh yes. I saw that. I didn't enjoy the film, but yeah.
Really?
I think
I watched it, so I will watch it because you say you didn't enjoy it.
I mean, it's one of those films. I mean, that's another thing that makes me want to become a filmmaker. It almost feels like when Black people make films, it's either really good, or they make it to appease the Western audience so they will watch it and, you know, agree to it. So when we have films that feature Black people, where people actually talk about, like in the Western culture, a lot of time they're all like, they were written by a white person, they're financed by a white person, everyone on the set is a white person. The only people that are Black are literally the people in the film. And for me, I can see that when you watch those things. It's even like the film The Help, which is now getting some criticism, finally. That film came out when I was like 21. I remember watching it, and all my friends, all white, were like, "Oh my God, that's amazing. Oh my God, that's like so cool." And I was like, that was so friggin' offensive. That was like the most offensive film I've ever seen. It's literally like, "Hey, white savior, thanks, save us." And it feels like Emma Stone keeps doing those types of movies, like La La Land, the same thing. It's like, "Hey, Jazz, I'm going to save it because I'm a white man, and I'm just going to take your culture and save it." And the one person in the film who doesn't care to save Jazz is the one Black person they put in the film. It's offensive and ridiculous that in 2018 or whatever that came out, that people can't see that. They're just like, "Oh, it's pretty." Even the songs weren't very good. For me, a good musical is a film where you can't stop singing the song in your head over and over again. You just like, you know, you're just going on like Frozen, everyone's singing Let It Go. I grew up watching like Roger and Hammerstein's musicals like Sound of Music and Oklahoma and things like that. And I can still sing you at least a few verses from a song from any one of those movies. I can't La La Land. It's just terrible. Even when I was watching the film, I was like, when will the song end? It's terrible. And like people were like, "Oh, you're exaggerating," and they would try and play it just without the film, and they'll be like, "No, it's terrible." That for me, it's like you should be able to listen to the songs without watching the film and enjoy it, or else you have a problem. It just didn't feel like there was a lot of thought put into it. It felt more like style over substance. It was more about the fanfare and the visuals, and visually it's stunning, but in terms of everything else, it lacked and failed its genre for me. But that's my opinion. In terms of, but I think it's also to do with the fact that the films are forced and they're inauthentic. Like it just didn't feel authentic that Ryan Gosling, who is like in his late 30s now, who apparently was in his early 20s in that film, I'm supposed to believe that, like, you know, was able to live the way he did, to the way he did. It was, for me, it's just a celebration of white privilege to like the fullest, and that's why it really annoyed me.
Okay, let me come in here. In relation to your story is peculiar. It is peculiar to you. Now, taking off from your story, how could we ever tell a fascinating Black sourced story African source story, Nollywood source story. How could we ever? What kind of story? I mean, go back to your story. Don't forget your story.
I
Now,
know.
tell me. Yeah,
I
tell
think it's
me.
more find something that's relatable to everyone. If you look at,
Okay.
I mean, that's the fact that the biggest film of the year until Corona happened, which is also quite ironic. It's called Parasite, and that was a Korean film. And I've been obsessed with Korean cinema for 10 years. So I was just like, finally, that's what I watch all the time. If I want to see a good film, where I'm going to find something different. It's going to have a little bit of culture that I don't know much about. And it's
Okay.
going to look good. I watch Korean films.
So your issue is authenticity.
No, I think we need to find a balance between telling stories where everyone can relate to. If you look at the film Parasite, everyone can relate to that film.
Yeah.
It's a primal thing. It's about survival for everyone involved. For the rich guys, it's about them keeping their bubble intact, and for the guys at the bottom, it's about them trying to stay afloat because they're literally at the bottom. We can all relate
Now
to that. Everything else in
back
that
to
film
your
was
story.
different.
Yeah. Now going back to your story, I find the character, is that the villain or life itself, very fascinating.
Yes.
What do I say about him? He's a typical human being.
Yes.
He's a human being who sees you in a pit and covers you with the sand. Tell me a little bit about him. What's your feeling about him?
For me, Ola was a real person that happened in the story, but Ola was also a representation of what happens. I feel the reason why we as a people have not necessarily been able to achieve the success that we deserve and we know that we should or could. And that's because when we're in situations where no one else can help us, we don't help each other either. Ola should and could have helped these people because he was an asylum seeker too. He's Nigerian too. He probably also had struggle too, but he found a way out. And apparently, because it was hard for him, he's going to make it even harder for, this family who really don't deserve that right now. They're going through a loss. The kids have lost their father. This woman's lost her husband. They're now in a new country, completely new culture. This is a time where people should be kind to each other. But unfortunately, he took advantage, and that happens a lot. Now, for me, it's not me stereotyping and saying, hey, all Nigerians do that or things like that. For me, I just wanted to highlight the fact that when it comes to Black women, we are probably the most oppressed race of human beings on this earth. By that, I mean, we don't get any support in any way, shape, or form. When it comes to feminism, we don't get supported. When I think about, look at it from a Western point of view, I can see why Black men have been able to integrate more with white people than Black women. For one, a lot of Black men have managed to, marry or copulate with white women. So now their cultures are fused. But also here, a lot of white guys like to go to Black barbers because they do better fades. So they get to sit in a room and they get to sit in a room and mingle together and have that bond and do all those stuff. But Black women, we can't do that. All the hairdressers don't do black hair. So we have to go to a segregated hairdressers. Whereas every other race, even if they're part of the AM community, their hair is silkier. So they go to a white hairdresser. So that means that those white women are probably spend more time, if they spend time with people outside their race, with maybe Indians or a Chinese person, than a Black woman. So they don't really talk about us when they talk about issues. I mean, if I look at all the funds that get given out when they talk about diversity and the diverse people it was given to, it's always white women. So I don't understand why they're still classed as diverse in 2020, because I don't think they are. And in doing so, it just means that people of color, especially Black women, don't get the opportunities that they deserve. So I just wanted to show just some of the internal struggles that Black women go through that we don't talk about, because there is no space for us to talk about it in. We don't talk about it with each other because of that fear and that shame. We don't talk about it with the men because we're scared they'll take advantage, especially when you're single and you have, these kids. And you can't talk about it with, you know, the people in the West, because they don't even know your story or what you went through to get here. So for me, I wanted to sort of start that conversation and get people to start to understand that, you know, for a lot of people, especially Africans, to move to the West, it's not easy at all. A lot of people in Nigeria think it is because, you know, I'm living in London and things like that. But it's a struggle every day to, you know, demand what you're worth. When you're walking around with a Nigerian name and you have 2 passports and your mom has a weird, funny accent to people and you don't have a father, like, you know, it's definitely not easy
Which
at
is
all.
that brings me to the next question. I mean, you've talked about color, talk about segregation, talk about diversity, and you probably always look forward to integration. Erivo, who acted Harriet Tubman, has a single mother. I mean, in the long run, do you know what I see? I
I think
see
she's
you.
a great actress. I just didn't think the film was good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I feel people like you should cause some level of in every one of us all over the world about the plight of the black woman. Because if you look at the Western society, after the white woman is the black man.
Yes.
After the black man
It's everyone
is
else.
his woman. Is his woman. So if you probably would want to meet me or some other woman filmmaker or female filmmaker, what are the real issues that can be trashed out in movies on and on and on in the next maybe 5, 10 when it comes to the plight of the man in the West?
For me, there's so many issues that Black women face that doesn't talked about. There's so many medical issues that we have that are synonymous to Black women that people don't talk about when it even comes to vaginal health, for like gynecology, when it comes to, you know, being able to give birth and things like that. Black women are more likely to get endometriosis, yet endometriosis has no cure, despite the fact that 1 in 10 women have it, because it's incredibly underfunded, because it's a disease that is synonymous with women. Whereas if you look at the research and money for prostate cancer, which is again something that's synonymous to men, it's incredibly large. It's just like, and because endometriosis is an illness that is mostly more synonymous with people of color than Caucasian women, no one's fighting for it because it doesn't bother them. But also, like, a big thing in the Black community, which I always grew up with and I always found as an issue, is like, it's the colorism that we have within the community, which obviously is ingrained in us from colonialism, the slave days of having the darker skinned people outside doing the hard menial work, and the light skinned to the dark skin had the easier life because they were in the house, but they were probably getting raped all the time and having the other horrible stuff seen to them that no one saw. So that divide happened because everyone was dealing with their struggle and their pain like by themselves and not talking about it and being like, this happened to me, that happened to me. I feel like as a people, as Black people, we've sort of built this sort of wall that we had to in order to get through pain and strife. And we sort of united when we needed to, when everything was against us. But I feel like we've gotten a little bit comfortable in terms of the fact that it's not as bad as before, but it's definitely not good at all. And there's a lot of things that need to be talked about. So, I mean, even here in the UK, women still bleach their skin all the time. And I think that's something that needs to be addressed, not necessarily because I think it's wrong. Anyway, everyone has their choice. White women tan all the time, but it needs to be done safely. And the bleach products that exist now are mostly illegal in the Western countries because they have a lot of, ingredients that people should not be using on their body. But because no one really knows about this, no one's really put any research into it. I mean, they can make a lot of money from it, clearly, because of the high demand. But also, why are women doing this? Why do they feel the need to brighten the color of their skin? Even the hair thing. My mom relaxed my hair from when I was a child, so I never really thought anything about it. But as I've gotten older, I've been like, why do I relax my hair? Like, what's bad? What's so bad about having an afro? Like, why do we do a lot of the things we do? Like even relaxing our head, that again, those chemicals, they haven't been changed for like 50 years. They're very bad for you. There's so many warnings, like you have to do this, you can't touch the scalp, you can't do this. It kind of feels like it's something that shouldn't be on your body, and yet, you know, that's all we have. I still have to go to certain shops if I want to buy hair products or makeup, because I won't be able to find my shade in the local pharmacy. I still have that issue. I even like eyebrow pencil. There's no black ones because everyone here has blonde eyebrows or brown eyebrows or red eyebrows. So there's literally no black eyebrow pencil. I have to like buy on the internet, and there's a lot of things that we are definitely very much ignored in so many ways that people don't see, like so many ways. And that's kind of what I want to start to highlight, because I just think that it's just ignorance. People just don't know, so they don't try.
One of the problems that the black family has is a rapport between the black man and the black woman. In the US, there are a lot of single mothers out of willfully becoming single mothers because they can't take anything from the black man. Do you hope that you could make a movie that would stress the need for the black man to adore the black woman?
I mean, definitely so. That's kind of what I want to sort of work towards. But I feel like that's something I need as a person. I need to start to sort of see black men as allies again, which has been, you know, difficult because, you know, growing up, I would have black men sort of come up to me and be like, "Oh, you're pretty for a black girl," because all they do is date white girls. And it's sort of like, is that a compliment? Like it's not. It's an insult. You're comparing me to someone who I can never be. And sort of growing up having that all the time. I mean, I have a brother, so I love my brother because I have to love him. But I don't agree with a lot of the things he does. He's very much a typical black man, and a lot of that has to do with my mother too. And that's something I want to address: is black men become black men because of their black mothers. If you keep telling your son that, you know, he is the bee's knees, even when he's not, if you keep telling him when he does bad things that it's okay because he's an angel, if you keep telling him that no woman is good enough for him, so he should just go around and treat everyone like crap, but only be good to his mother, do you think he's going to grow up to be a upstanding guy? You know, he's going to grow up to be a horrible person to women. And the problem I found, especially as a woman of color, is black men tend to mature as they get older. They start to notice us, especially if they have daughters. They start to realize, oh no, I shouldn't have done this, I shouldn't have done that. But by then the damage is done. Like you've scarred someone. And that's a problem for black women, is that, you know, we are a lot more damaged as women than people think. We get cheated on all the time because our men just feel like they deserve this. We get used in terms of emotionally, but we don't get that emotional support back. Not by all black men, definitely not, but a lot. And like even my brother, I love him, but he's very headstrong and he doesn't listen. He's sort of like in his head, this is the way things should be, so it just must be this way, listen to me. But then when he has his issues, we have to only listen to him because you know, his point of view is like important. It's just very frustrating because as women and men, we all have our strengths and weaknesses. And, you know, if you believe in God, which I hope you do, there is a reason why every single being is on this earth. We're here for a reason. There's a reason why there's a food chain. We fulfill a purpose. So like, and all those gender roles don't actually necessarily fit every sort of person. There are a lot of men who are very feminine. They're not gay. They just do more feminine things. They like cooking and staying at home and all that stuff. And there are a lot of women that like to do boyish things.
I love cooking.
A lot of guys do. I think men either love cooking or they just don't know how to cook because their moms never taught them.
And many women these days don't know how to cook.
Yes, that's also true. But I'm lucky I had a Nigerian mother, So my mom not taught me how to cook. My brother, not so much. His cooking is a bit questionable. Actually, when I say that, it's terrible. But I can cook, so that's good.
I was going to ask you the next question, but you sort of answered everything. So let me tell the world. I've been talking to Eno Enefiok, very intelligent from what I've experienced today, talking to her, intelligent, resourceful, and focused on liberating Black women from the grapes of oppression. So, yeah. I don't want to say this is what I'm talking about, but you will understand who I'm talking about. How is the protagonist of these scripts faring now, having been able to live through what she went through and brought up successful children? Let me use the word successful children because you are successful. You're on your way to becoming a bigger success. How is she seeing the world now after passing through all that?
I think part of the reason why I definitely want to sort of get the film made is to finally just give my mom the dream that she wanted, which was like she always said that, like, you know, when we were struggling and we were coming up and all that stuff, she would always say like, no, things will be better one day. Someone's gonna like write a book about me. So I'm not gonna write a book about her, but I made a film about her. But also just the fact that my mom was a very resilient person. I feel like that's where it comes from. Like even in Nigeria, growing up, like my father had a bit of money. So, you know, if you have money, your wife doesn't need to work. But my mom insisted on finishing her degree. She was pregnant with me when she was doing her bachelor's degree. And she was pregnant with my brother when she was doing her master's. I remember like being a child and seeing her in the kitchen breastfeeding my brother, cooking and like reading for her her university stuff. And then she passed and became an accountant and insisted on having a job, which of course was a big source of mocking for my father, where all his friends would be like, hey, don't you make enough money? Why does your wife have to work? You know, that's, you know, that kind of patriarchy that I hope doesn't still exist in Nigeria, but definitely existed then.
It still exists.
Oh no. So I remember like my mother and father fighting a lot because my mom refused to give up her job.
Working.
Yeah, she was like, no, I'm going to do this. And, you know, thank God she did, because you know how things are in Nigeria. My father died. We didn't get any of his money. And if my mom didn't have her education, things would have been even worse for us when we came here. Like being an African and then having no education, your job prospects are cleaner and that's about it. And even when we moved here, my mom worked as a cleaner for a year before she realized she could use her degree. So, because no one told her. So for a whole year, you know, she went, yeah. So like we had to go to the job center and they would ask you, you know, do you have any qualifications? And my mom told, you know, everyone that interviewed her, and they always just put up for cleaning jobs. And it was just like one day, it was like pure fate. She goes to the office that she usually cleans and they just tell her, oh, you're fired because the office is like no longer existed. So my mom had to go back to the job center. And then she was very lucky that the guy who was there that time was a Nigerian guy. And he looked at her degree and he was like, why do you keep doing cleaning jobs when you are an accountant? And my mom said, I didn't know I could be an accountant. And he was like, oh, your degree will pass. You just need to do this course. It takes 2 weeks. And she did the course. And then we started, you know, being able to make ends meet and be able to have a little bit less stress financially. But it was always stressful because even when my mom, you know, worked in her field, she was always getting paid less money and doing more work. And her bosses were always, you know, 10, 20 years younger than her, had no experience, but, you know, they were born here, they have an accent, and that's the way things is. So I feel like over the years, my mom kind of just lost that fight that she had back in Nigeria, where she was like, no, I'm going to do this. And I feel like making this film and showing my mom that I didn't have to sort of take those stereotypical routes that we as Black people feel like we need to do, which is go and be a doctor, or, you know, go and be an engineer, go and find a job where you're always necessary, basically. That feels like what the intention is behind it. I can, you know, take a risk and it pays off. I feel like that will inspire her again, because she was the first person that did that in front of me. That's where I learned it from, and that's where I got inspired from. And to be like, hey, as a woman, even if I'm in Nigeria, I can do what I want because my mom is doing it. She's like, my dad bought her a Mercedes and she literally threw the keys at him, and the next day bought herself a Nissan Bluebird. It was the ugliest car I've ever seen, but I had the most fun in my life in that car because my mom was the happiest when she drove it, because it was something that she got herself, not, you know, a thing that was just given to her. She loved it because she worked hard for it. And I feel like that's where I learned it from. And that's why I want to make it. It's like a celebration to my hero.
Wow. What do you want me to say? What do you want me to say again? Well, I think you just said everything that I need to ask you, but I'm going to ask you a two-pronged question with two themes. One, you just analyze your mother's life and see such life-changing experiences that should educate any Nigerian, and women for that matter, who go abroad and probably do not have immediate succor to survive, and with children for that matter. But yeah, that's it. You've explained it. But then going back to movies, and given your trying to let out what is impacted in reality in your life, what advice would you give to people who might probably want to do biopics? Because what I seem to see is that a lot of we don't do a lot of biopics in Nigeria, and we don't even get inspired by biographies to do movies. If you take people like Azikiwe, Awolowo, Sodana of Sokoto, Isaac Boro, a lot of them, Nigerians are scared to make movies out of such figures or issues that surround, because a lot of times we don't know how to interpret reality. What advice would you give us, please?
I feel like from growing up and watching Nollywood and then seeing what Nollywood has sort of progressed into, I feel like Nollywood was better when I was a kid, because at least, even though the quality was terrible, I was learning things from watching it. There was always a moral. That was something that we had. That was our USP as a people. We still had that natural way of storytelling where there's a beginning, middle, and end. At the end, you learn something as a person. That the whole point is always to learn, to be good.
Which is the value add to a story.
Yeah, and it feels like over the years, in a desperate attempt to be more Hollywood, we're trying to make what we think that Hollywood wants. But Hollywood already has these films and they look better and they have people that people know in the film. So why the hell would they watch the Nigerian version? So like, again, mentioning a film like Parasite, they just made a film that fitted their culture, and it happened to also translate because it has dealt with something that we all can relate to. And that's why I also feel like it took me years to get to this point when I'm writing my scripts and doing this stuff, because I spent a long time trying to write what I thought people wanted to hear. Don't be afraid to write the stuff that you like or that interests you, because it's going to resonate more with people. People are going to feel that heart, but also there's a lot of people who feel that way who probably haven't even addressed it or know they feel that way because no one has said it. There's something, it's like when you're in a room with someone and they say something and you're like, yeah. And then you're like, oh my God, someone else. And you kind of just feel this sort of relief that you're not alone anymore. There's a lot of amazing stories of people, Nigerian people, that people don't know about. I feel like the West are definitely yearning and desperate to hear about these things. I feel like this is what's going to change perspective of how they see us. Learning stories about how we were as people, the kind of people we were, just happy people, just doing normal things that they do, just in our Nigerian way. That has more resonance than, just trying to make an action movie in Nigeria with, weird looking machine guns and all that stuff. It's just, I can always tell within the first 10 minutes if I'm going to keep watching the film.
maybe doing a Captain America film, Spider-Man film, Superman film.
The world has so many of that. But also remember, for me as a filmmaker, I'm not trying to make the next Avengers or Star Wars even, because Star Wars is trash. Sorry, it's just terrible. It's like has no storyline. It's just action. I'm trying to make like the next Juno, the next Breakfast Club, you know, next Ferris Bueller's Day Off, films that people find as generations go on, and they love it and they rewatch it over and over again because it still speaks to them. It still has a resonance, despite the fact that they're wearing weird 80s costume and they used a piece of technology that you've never seen before in your life, and you're going to Google after and be like, what is that? Like everything else resonates with you as a person. You can connect with that, you can empathize with that. And that's just what we need to do as people. Just go out and just take simple stories, because those films that I mentioned, the budgets were nothing in comparison to the Avengers. The Juno, I think the budget was 3 million. That film made 100 million worldwide when it was released. So that came out 10 years ago. Imagine how much money it's made since then. So 3 million, 100 million. That's the kind of films I want to make, not because I want to make a big budget, but as a person of color, people are going to be more likely to invest in my second film if I made them like a 1,000, 2,000% return on their first investment. It also means that if I take a loss on my next few films, it's fine because I made them the money in the first film anyway. So they're going to keep taking a chance on my weird, different ideas because they know at some point another one is going to strike gold. Woody Allen, which is a terrible, example to use because of his history, but he's used the same financiers since his first film. So the same people give him money to make every film he wants, despite the fact that, you know, like for 3 films, he makes no money, and then he'll make one and then makes loads of money. They know that eventually the money will come back. So especially for your first film, even if like long term you see yourself as making a thriller, make one that's really simple, like the film Saw. So simple. It's just set in 2 locations. One of it is just like a bunker somewhere, and the other one is like an exterior location. How did they get that film made? The filmmakers are Australian. They took their feature film and they said, let's make it into a short. Let's take the simplest part of this film and let's make a short and let's put it out into the world and see what happens. And they did. They took a very short part of the film and they made a short version of it. And a bunch of people in Hollywood were like, okay, we'll give you some money to make the film. But they decided that their idea was actually gold. They knew that they had something there. So instead of taking their fee, they insisted on having a percentage in the film. They didn't know it was going to be a franchise. They just knew that taking £100,000 or whatever, dollars or whatever it was that they were going to give them, because it was a small budget, and it was a huge risk, wasn't worth taking. It was worth taking more of a risk. And they did. And the film was a huge success. And now they've made 6 more. And if they had sold their film, the film would have made 6 more. But the creators of the whole franchise would have only made the $100,000 that they signed over when they sold the rights to the thing. So I feel like when you make stuff that's personal, that you really believe in, you know how to sell it. And you know that you're going to, you believe in yourself enough. When you make something that's not personal, you throw it away. And sometimes that could also be a bit risky as well. So yeah, I think we just need to start being honest. If the sort of current climate has taught us anything, is that we as people need to be more vocal about what our struggles are. We can't just see a black man die on the screen and start blaming white people, because it's not just their fault. If every time something happens, we're like, this is terrible, and they're like, but we're strong, it's cool, they're going to do it again. They need to understand why it's not okay. They need to see us as human beings. And like I say this to everyone, what we as black people are fighting for are the same rights as animals. Because when an animal gets killed on camera, that stuff gets taken off the internet in like 2 hours, 3 hours, 24 hours max. Like every time there's a cat killed on the internet, it's gone. Like people are like, why are you sharing this? You're disgusting. The video of George Floyd dying is still online in its entirety, and no one thinks there's anything wrong with that. We're fighting for the same rights as animals. And so if people are going to see us as humans and go past that, we need to start sharing human stories, not just fake stuff that is not authentic to us as a people or as a filmmaker is making it.
You know the impression. You know the impression I'm getting. I've gotten so much education today, but the things I knew when I was far younger. But then, for you to bring them all into perspective now, tells me you are a very principled woman that wants to iron out some issues that you've observed, and yeah, and that would be good for you as as a black woman and all blacks generally. But then, and I've also noticed that you understand the business side, forget the artistic side, you understand the business side of this stuff. So my last question to you would be, comparing Nollywood, Hollywood, Bollywood, I don't know what they call what do they call the British film
Lollywood.
industry.
In Pakistan is Lollywood, I believe. I've actually worked on Bollywood and Lollywood, and I will say I enjoyed working in Nigeria more. It was not fun. Oh,
Okay.
it's terrible. It was terrible.
Okay. Now, considering the good side, from now forward, what advice would you give Nollywood? The reason why I'm asking this question is that it seems to me that a lot of people in Nollywood do not even with their movies. And the reason why they don't make so much money and go to sleep and think of the next best story is probably because they don't understand the business side of the game, which is that when it comes to in terms of bookkeeping, in terms of being accountable to your investor, being accountable to the people on set, the crew, and everybody. In terms of, I mean, wrap it all in business sense. What advice would you give us?
I mean, for me, watching the industry in Nigeria, I'm baffled by the fact that people don't take advantage of the amount of money that has been poured into the arts. But there are a lot of stipulations to getting that money, and it has to do with structure because, of course, Nigerians know that they don't want to just give $1 million or to someone. They're going to run off and not spend it wisely. If you want the industry to be better, you need to invest in it. And this is to everyone who gets a budget and decides to overpay themselves. You're not doing your film a service, and you're not doing your career a service. You might have paid yourself a little bit extra, but you've taken away any future earnings you can get. But what I've seen a lot is impatience. People sort of run before they can walk. I've seen people who've made a film and then they're like, oh, how do I get it distributed? And you're like, how did you make the film before you had, before you got here? Because now you have to go all the way back to the beginning and you already have a product. And when you start working on marketing strategy, it does kind of affect your film. Because you could be like, oh, okay, we wrote this script and we assumed we were going to shoot it in this location and it was going to appeal to this audience. But in developing the script and seeing what's going on in the world, we decided to adapt it slightly. So all of a sudden, that changes things in terms of marketing. You need to now cast a different person and do all this stuff because you did your due diligence. If you go make the film and then you start to figure it out, you can't go back and reshoot it. But also, not sort of doing any marketing in the beginning makes the job a lot harder for you when you have a finished product. It's sort of like, before Apple releases a new phone, they tell you about it like 2 years before it comes out. They tell you about it when it's just a sketch on literally someone's iPad. They release that sketch like, hey, iPhone's coming out. So for 2 years, everyone's like, an iPhone's coming out. Like, there's a new Batman film being made. You've seen a trailer already, even though they've only shot for 2 weeks. Why? Because they need to market so that people care. This is not like back in the 80s where you can get away with doing things like that because the process of getting things, to festivals and the distribution and getting into the cinemas was a lot longer. Now a film comes out in a cinema and it's on Netflix in 3 months. So it's very quick, which means that people need to know that this product exists before it even exists. You need to create your own, Twitter, Instagram. You need to create a website. You need to, start getting the word out there. You need to make sure that your crew are tweeting about it, that your crew are posting pictures, that your cast are posting pictures. You need to have a strategy and a plan of which festivals am I going to enter. That's another problem with Nigerian filmmakers. A lot of films never go to festivals. Like, so stupid. How are people outside Nigeria supposed to see your film if the few times you put in a festival, it's an African festival? Like, think about it. If you wanna, you know, make it into Hollywood, or if we want to be seen as not just Nigerian filmmakers, we need to start putting our work out into the world. And when you start setting the goal of, I'm going to get a film into Cannes, I'm going to get a film into South by Southwest, I'm going to get a film into Biennial, I'm going to get a film into Estetica, you're going to then go on the film's website. You're going to look at the films that were selected, because every festival has a specific sort of style that they like. So it's not getting accepted doesn't mean your film was bad. It just means it doesn't fit their style. So before you make your film, you need to figure out if there are enough festivals that are prestigious enough that would take your film. And if there's not, then you need to change something in there to fix it. Like, once you start to think about this stuff, it just makes life so much easier. So by the time you've like gone to market, people actually want your product. Festivals they're not free marketing, because you have to pay to enter your film and then you have to go to the events and stuff. They're an investment of time and love and money, but they're a breeding ground of everyone you need to speak to. And it's the one time where they're going to be completely chill and cool, because there's free alcohol and there's free food and everyone's happy. This is the best time to talk to them, not when they're in your office and they have a meeting in 10 minutes and their assistant is trying to get rid of you. So why aren't you going to these places? I say that because I didn't used to go there. And then I realized I live in London. There's like 3 big festivals here. You have the BFI Festival, you have the London Film Festival that have joined together, and then you have a few 2 other ones as well. And I can just easily go. It's just like on my doorstep. I don't have to pay for a hotel. I don't have to do any of the other things. Just go to the festival. And in doing so, you make such great contacts, even if it's not the contact you were hoping. And it won't be. You're not going to meet, I can't say Harvey Weinstein, because, you know, you don't want to meet Harvey Weinstein anymore. But another famous person, that whoever is the new Harvey Weinstein, you're probably not going to meet that person. But you could meet someone who, like 2 or 3 years down the line, becomes like a very useful contact, because when you met them, they were an assistant to some director in HBO, and now they're head of development, and you're their friend. So they're now going to help you because you have that contact, and they've known you when they were starting up. So you just got to be smart. Just got to be as visible as you can. Just got to be resourceful. Got to invest in yourself. And I know these things can be hard, and it looks like I'm living a high life. I'm not. Like, I'm just lucky to get this apartment. And as I said, my flatmate doesn't live here anymore. So for 3 months, I've had to deal with all of the rent myself on no money, because no work. So it's not easy at all to invest in yourself. And now more than ever, I'm investing in myself more, because I know if I don't, once this is over, I'm going to have a longer way to climb to get back to where I need to be or where I want to be. So I'm using this time as a way to transition, so that when this is over, I can actually start to demand the work that I want, which is to be directing, not to be helping directors who I don't even think are as good as me, because I've worked with them and I'm doing their job for them half the time. Like, I can't explain to you the amount of sets I've been on where at some point I just direct, because I don't have the time anymore to wait for this person to do their job. It's costing me money, it's costing us time, everyone's stressed, and then everyone's asking me what to do anyway. So you're just here. And they know it. But then, you know, when they win the awards, they don't mention you. I don't want to be that sort of person. I want to give credit where credit is due, because I'm not going to get to where I want to be by myself. I'm going to get here by people helping me, people believe in me, whether it's, you know, people giving me money for films or people just watching my films. Because if no one watches what you make, it doesn't really matter that you made it. Everyone is important for everyone's success story. And I think people forget that. And that's what we as Nigerians need to remember. Just think, plan before you make a move. Because it's very disheartening when you put all that time and energy into something and no one wants it. That can just put you off forever. And that's a shame. But also, if you've never made a big movie before, make a small one first, because people are more forgiving. You can make a small film and can have all the mistakes in the world, and people will see past it and see a good story. You make a big film and it's just a lot of mistakes. People don't, because it's a longer film. It takes a lot longer to get into the storyline and to the people. And if you spend 20 minutes looking at the microphone keep dipping in and all the other stuff, you're not going to keep watching. So make all the mistakes on some short, and then become ambitious and go for the big one. But that's not to say don't try, but that would be my advice, especially because it is so hard to get access to these technical resources, or also to crew. Because as you said, there are no unions. I don't know if there's like any database where you can just go and find crew members. I know for me, when I have to find crew members, it's hard, but it's definitely a lot easier. It just depends on my budget. If I have money, I just call as many agents and I just say, this is my money, send me CVs. I don't care who gets the job. Like I don't, because I just want to get it filled up as possible. If I don't have as much money, I have a black book I go through, or I know another place I can go and find these people. But in Nigeria, that doesn't seem to be as easy to be able to find these tribes or groups in these kinds of societies. So just create the opportunities you want as well.
They do have guilds or unions, but the problem is that the unions are not strong. They're not well structured, and sometimes they quarrel over little things. So you could say they're not together like that. So if you're not together as an industry in guilds or unions, how would you now convince investors to invest in you if you can't trust yourself within the house?
Well, that's what I mean. Like if you look at filmmakers who make it here, they work with the same crew. So Chris Nolan works with the same crew he worked with on his first film. When I say the same crew, the same gaffer, the same art department, everyone is the same. In terms of like heads of department, the smaller department people may have like, climbed up and, but it's always the same team of people. As filmmakers in Nigeria, this is an opportunity to be trailblazers right now, because if you look at the West, they're all scrambling to figure out how not to be racist anymore. They're all trying to figure out how to navigate the world into a space where things have more harmony. In the West, film sets are not that harmonious. There's always beef between departments. The lighting guys and the camera guys are always horrible because they think they're the bee's knees because they have the camera and the lights. So they always disrespect the makeup department because they're taking too long, where you're like, without the actors, what's the point of the lights and the camera? You need the actors. They need to get ready. They need to be in costume. No one cares about the lights if their costume looks like crap. You're going to spend the whole time being like, why is her bra there? If their job's important too, but there is that segregation. So Nigeria has a very huge opportunity here to take advantage of that situation and be the example that the West needs. And the only way to do that is by the filmmakers literally on the ground setting those standards, finding the people that they're like, hey, do you want to be a producer? That's your thing. You have no experience? That's fine. We'll learn together. Let's learn together. Let's make our mistakes together. Hey, you want to be a cinematographer? You have a camera? You have no experience? That's fine. Let's learn together. Everything I learn about filmmaking, I learn on the internet. So you have the internet in London. No one taught me anything because I'm a Black woman. I just came on set and just pretended like I knew what I was doing. I had to lie and then, go home and then read the internet to check that I did everything correctly. And then I was like, oh, okay, you did. That's cool. If someone used a term on set that I had never heard of, I would go home and Google, what does that mean? Because even on set, we have our own little language. If someone says 10-1, it means they're going to the toilet. So I remember the first time that someone said that to me and I was like, okay. And then because I was in charge of the actors, and then someone said, where's this person? I was like, what is 10-1? I didn't know. And then I just said, oh, he 10-1. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. So be out in 2 minutes. And I was like, what does 10-1 mean? I didn't know. And I would Google it. I couldn't find it for ages. And then one day I just said, what does 10-1 mean? And someone was like, oh, it just means go to the toilet. It's like the army term. In the army. That makes sense. But that didn't make me not able to do my job because I didn't know what that meant. I still was able to communicate to the other person who knew what it meant. So, my job was still done. But it doesn't matter. I still did everything else that was necessary. There is no blueprint on how to do things. Every film, every project requires a slightly different approach. So literally just go and find your people and keep them and keep making stuff. And then, as I said, get it into festivals. Stop waiting for the Nigerian industry to notice you. Take it out of the Nigerian industry, and then they'll call you back. That's just the best way to do it.
Wow, it's been so nice talking to you. This is like revision all over. I've been talking to Eno Enefiok, an award-winning movie screenplayer who wrote Asylum, that won an award in 2019 from the British Urban Film Festival, BUFF, for Best Live Script Award. Well, Eno Enefiok has been described as an intelligent and resourceful. I can see that right now. She's a natural authority. I can see that because she's calm. Well, she just explained why she calmly was able to go through a pinhole. She's intelligent, problem-solving person. Yeah, that's right. You've said it all. She's a firm persuader with a sense of diplomacy. You've said it all. She's dedicated, hard worker with infectious energy. You said it all. She's reliable, producer and assistant director. Eno Enefiok, come back home.
I'll be back soon. You know, I just need to get my awards here, a few more awards, and then I definitely am going to open that film school, and I'm going to call it the Nigerian Film and Television School. So the acronym will be the NFTS, which is the acronym of the most famous film school in Europe. I want to take over. I want us to be the good NFTS, and the one here is a terrible one, because I've worked with many people in the NFTS, and they're not good. It's just because they have money, and it's a very well connected school. So, you know, people that went to that school, you have Roger Deakins, who shot 1917, and you have like all these big producers. So in going to that school, you automatically just can be able to go and get an internship working for Netflix and things like that. The whole days of it being a prestigious place where you actually learn is gone, and they're just living off the name. So I feel this is an opportunity to take that name and reclaim it, because, you know, the West took a lot from us. Let's take the NFTS. So that's my dream, to open the Nigerian Film and Television School, the NFTS, and just, you know, start to give Nigerians the opportunity to be able to make stuff. I mean, if there's a film school, it means that, you know, a poor boy whose family can't afford a camera can go to school and be able to rent the camera and be able to make a film, and not have to do this job or do this and struggle for 2 years to be able to do the same thing. And he'll also be able to have the support of like lecturers who will be able to look at what he shot and be like, do this again, do that again. And when the film's made, be able to have the contacts where he can be able to get into festivals. And I keep saying he, but I mean he and she, everyone. Doesn't matter. I want men and women, everyone to be, you know, telling their stories, doing their perspectives. If I could leave anyone with one advice, it is to not be afraid to predict the future when it comes to your CV. That's not to say lie. If there's something you can do, you know you can do it, but you haven't done it yet. And don't feel afraid to put it on your CV and say, I can do that. If someone then asks you about your experience in doing that, even if the experience is not in work, tell them about the experience. Just leave out every part of it that will tell them you didn't do that at work. You're not lying. You're just giving yourself an opportunity that you know that they won't give you. Just be smart, but only do it if you know you can do it. And you're not lying. You're, as I said, predicting the future, because when you get that job, you can then put that experience on there, which means it wasn't a lie in the first place. You just needed that little push. I had to do it. Everyone had to do it. And I learned this from Neil Gaiman, which that was how he made it as an author. And he's the author of Sandman and all the other, you know, amazing books that have been turned into movies over the past few years. And his first break, when he got his first break, it was because he lied on his CV, and then he got the job, and then he felt very guilty. And then he said to himself, no, I didn't lie. I was just, you know, projecting the future. And because he wanted to make sure that he didn't lie, his goal was to make sure that he did write for that publication, which he then did like 6 months later. So it meant it wasn't a lie. And then in his head, he was like, I should just keep doing this. I will just keep saying I've done this, and then I'll have to do it. And it's almost like, because he put it out into the world, he had to go, and he had that motivation all of a sudden. And I feel like that's something we need as creators and as artists, is artists inherently, we don't like to admit it, but we need self-affirmation from people more so than ever. We need people to tell us that we're awesome and that we're great. Like, we need it. We feed on it. If we didn't, why would we create? But when you're starting out, we are starved of it. We never get it. Like, no one is going to tell you that you're amazing. No one's going to tell you you're talented, not until you've made it. So you have to tell yourself that. And that's why it's important, as I said, to find these other people that are going to help, support you. When you start to get a bit discouraged, it's harder to give up when there's 5 other people who are also invested than, when you're just by yourself and you just decide, this is too much. So that's my advice. Believe in yourself, lie if you have to, but turn it into a truth, and just find the right people. And don't force it. Sometimes it will take years. It took me a long time, but it's worth it. Just find the right people and just keep going.
When you finish answering this question, I will bid you goodbye.
Yeah.
Because we can talk for 3 hours if I allow you to keep on like this. What advice would you give to the average Nigerian woman about finding herself? Because you found yourself. And because you found yourself, your independence, you are your own person. And even if you have a man in your life, a husband, whoever, in the next 1 year or 2 years, you're still your person.
I think it's as I said, it's obviously probably going to be a little bit harder in a country like Nigeria. And as I said, the person I look to when I think about that is my mom, who always just decided that wasn't for her. I just want to say it's good. It's annoying and it sucks that we have to work so much harder, but it's important that we do, because every time we don't, it's just more work for the next generation. And the reason why you're suffering is because the previous one gave up. And let's just not do that. Like, I can't be the only bearer of the stories of Black women, because as I said, my perspective is, varied. I have the Western perspective and I have the Nigerian perspective, which is also a little dated, but as you said, not as dated as I thought, but a lot of it will still be dated to a certain degree. And I don't want to offend my culture by being ignorant, because it happens all the time. So it's up to the people who were there, who had to live through the struggle, who are still living through the struggle, to do stuff together. I mean, here in the UK, there are so many like little mini groups that women start. Like, there's something called the Sinning Sisters, which was created by some female directors who decided they should create a kind of collective, so where they can support and help each other. So if they got a job and they couldn't do it, instead of that person then calling a man, they'll be like, no, my friend will do it, who is also in this collective. Like, again, just start supporting each other, start finding these groups, these hubs, and start doing, being innovative. Just because, a lot of women might think, oh, I'm not that creative, I can't do this, I can't do that. But production doesn't necessarily require you to be creative, although it is a very creative role. Depends on which type of producer you want to be. You can just be the hands-on money person, or you can be the person who does a bit of both, who's also going to jump in and try and influence some creative decisions because you're trying to make the budget less. So instead of just saying, you can't have this, you come up with a solution. You say, okay, instead of us burning the car, why don't we drive it into a lake? Because that costs £50,000 less and it still has the same effect. And the person's like, fine, you came up with a solution. You didn't just scream, no money. Some producers do that. There's so many things that women can do, but just trying to be creative. Now, growing up, there were lots of women who worked in salons and like doing hair and probably not getting paid a lot of money. They probably have no idea that if they just took the same skills onto a film set, they can make so much more money, because you need hair and makeup, you need costume, you need stylists, you need, so many things. And I feel like once women start to get on set and start to see the other roles that exist, they're going to definitely feel more enticed to do it. I feel like women on set, especially like when I go on set and I see a girl gaffer, and a gaffer is like the lighting person, for those who don't know, just jumping on like ladders and putting lights together. I'm like, God, that's so frigging cool. Like, she's just doing it. That's awesome. That's inspiring. And I feel like it inspires other women who are on set and they're like, oh, I just got into hair and makeup because that's what all the girls do. Maybe I should, try camera because I actually kind of like camera. I actually kind of like this. I think it's just taking those small little steps, but everything is easier when you have a support network. And if the support network isn't there, then just create it. Like Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. If there's a product that you need that doesn't exist, you either live without it or you make it yourself. So we have two choices. We can either just live without it, or we can change it and make it ourselves. And I think we should make it ourselves because we've been living without it for too long. So yeah, my advice is just try and speak up, be vocal. You don't have to be a filmmaker to have an influence in the way you're portrayed. Speak to men, like demand that you're heard. Because for the meantime, or for the moment, they are the ones in charge or the gatekeepers of the media. And so if we want to get influence, we need to start talking about our perspective, our stories, getting them to think, oh, okay, maybe we should do this. Maybe we should do that. Maybe we should do this. And then slowly women can start to, get in there and not just be actors. They can actually be the next Oprah or whatever.
Thank you so much, Eno. It's been so nice talking to you. I have so much education. I believe those watching us will also be educated. This is the end of our talk. I'm expecting you in Nigeria, and if you don't come so soon, I'll be talking to you again so soon. Thank you so much.
No worries.
Do have a good evening.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So I've been talking to Eno Enefiok from London, and as usual on Film Talk, I would advise you go to filmlab.ng/Film Talk anytime you want to watch us. So check out our blog, forum, short video contests, and a whole lot. We're also on Facebook and Instagram. I'll see you in the next edition. My name is Efefiong Akan. I'm the project coordinator, Film Lab. Thank you.